But I want to go back now to where this all began, at least as it regards you coming on our show. Professor Wolff, what does the film Boss Baby tell us about contemporary capitalist ideology?
Well, it tells me many things. It tells me that underneath the pretense that everything is working out really pretty well, there's a pretty good understanding, as in that movie, that there's a lot of bitterness, a lot of nastiness, a lot of struggle, a lot of weird kinds of belief that are widely shared. For me, the best moment in that film comes early when the bad new baby, having arrived, explains to the older sibling who's not quite understanding what's going on. He leans across and he says, "There's just not enough love for both of us." You remember that?
Yeah.
He actually has a theory. It's got to be a fight to the death between the two little ones because there's not enough. That's what American working people are doing. There's not enough money to give you a decent life. So you have to have debts up the wazoo to send your kid to college. You have to do without. You have to, because there's just not enough. It's bullshit in the movie and everyone sees it. And it's bullshit in the economics too, although people don't see it yet. That's my job, is to help people see that there's no problem with amount of money and none of that. Never was. It's only a question of how you go about using it and dividing it and making it work. If you don't want to, yeah, you can give it all to a few people and everybody else is in trouble. But there's no necessity. That's not necessary. That's not built into anything. It's a political struggle, and you either fight it and win or you live with resignation. And that's been the lot of people for a long time. So for me, the movie was interesting because it captured the crazy ideology and showed how it shaped the lives of those two little ones because of the fury of the older one being displaced and the fury of the younger one wanting to be the displacer and needing an ideological story to tell to make it all sound reasonable and necessary when it wasn't.
Also interesting that the Boss Baby, voiced by Alec Baldwin, who famously gave voice to, I think, one of the greatest expressions of capitalist domination and sadism in Glengarry Glen Ross.
Which is referenced in Boss Baby when he says, "Put the cookie down, cookies are for closers." Which was a huge hit with all the 8-year-olds who saw that movie.
But is a movie like predicated on like the anxieties around scarcity and competition,
right.
It is kind of interesting that they're like, okay, well, at the end, he does not defeat the baby. He unifies with the baby, and there's solidarity with him and the baby to overthrow the Boss Baby bureaucracy, if you will.
Yeah, that's the thing that sticks with me is how it presents capitalism as like generative. It's like capitalism is inextricable. You can't get away from it.
Right.
Like it exists before you're born.
Right.
Like there's
you're born into it.
Yeah, there's a factory with machinery and bosses in the place where babies are made, and then even the way that it imagines like reproduction, like it's the conflict between the babies and the puppies, because in the world of Boss Baby, you only have a kid if you want one, and then like the factory makes a baby for you. So they're literally creating need. It's like they're saying that they're not satisfying needs for children or anything. They're creating them. You need to go down to earth to make people want to have the kids. So everything is just in this web of production for its own sake, and the need to create demand for things that aren't necessarily necessary. And that's sort of the generative structure of everything is you need people to consume, and you need to. If there isn't enough, if they don't need enough, then you make them want something, and then you provide that for them.
I would use it to teach the economics of advertising, because that's what that is.
Yeah.
The company, to make money, has to dump the stuff it's produced. It has to have buyers. If the buyers don't want it, don't need it, don't like it, you've got to fix that. And the way you fix it, if you can, is by inundating them with the advertising, playing on their psychological problems to get them to part with their money and buy the damn thing you've produced. That's why in economics it is so crazy when we teach in conventional economics that production happens in response to consumption. The craziness is to assume that consumption is a given. This comes out of your soul and has nothing to do with what? With what you see every day on every billboard, I came here on the subway. To get through the subway turnstile, I had to read the advertisements on the subway's turnstile. Every minute, we all know that, we're inundated with people spending fortunes of money to shape our desires. But in the economics textbook of the classroom, production is a wonderful arrangement because it meets our needs, almost as if we need to pretend that the producers are not spending big bucks to shape our needs at every chance they get.
Yeah, to go on that, to more in this contrast between the world that exists in an economics textbook and an economics classroom and the world that actually exists where we see the movie Boss Baby, and even though we can't quite put our finger on it, we identify with the figure of a tyrannical infant. But how does, just generally speaking, how does the broadly understood, when people talk about economics or the economy, how does your understanding of that differ from what is overwhelmingly taught in schools and for what most people, when they think of it, what the idea that's in their head?
Econ 101.
Econ 101. Okay, there's a number of ways to get at this. I guess the biggest one for me was and still is that if you look around this society with more or less reasonable open-mindedness, you must see some things. For example, you know that there are some people that are very rich and some people that are very poor. Every community has them. Most Americans know exactly what part of the community they don't go in the evening because you don't go there in the evening. Their parents, when they were young, explained that to them one way or another. We know inequality, and if you're here in New York City, as I live, it is so overwhelmingly obvious every day that you really have to have a cultivated blindness not to see it. I'll give you another example. The instability. I mean, we're now living in the 10th year after a crash, 2008. Kind of everybody knows that. The headlines this week are full of stories that we might be about to have another crash. 75 years ago, we had the greatest crash this system ever had, the 1930s. I mean, crashes are part of it. I used to make a joke in my class that would help students understand. If your roommate was as unstable as this economic system, you would have moved out long ago. But you accept this. You kind of think it's necessary. It's somehow like the rain. You don't like it, but every few days it drops water. But an economic system isn't nature. It's something human beings organize. So for me, I would want economics to talk to me about the great difference between rich and poor. Adam Smith is the founder of this science. He wrote a famous book, The Wealth of Nations. He was interested why some nations are rich and why some are poor. That's me. I like that question. I would like it to be answered, and I would like it to be answered honestly. We have a system that produces enormous inequality. It always has. What about that?